The Italian M13 tank reflected a design philosophy born from compromise, a balance between limited industrial capacity and a desire for modern mechanisation. While other nations moved toward three-man turrets and specialised crew roles, Italy pursued simplicity. Nowhere is this more evident than in the commander's seat. The M13 tank was equipped with a two-man turret. In the M13 the commander also served as the gunner, seated on the right side of the turret, while a loader was positioned on the left. This arrangement differentiated the Italian approach from that of other nations, such as Germany and Britain, which increasingly adopted three-man turrets that allowed the commander to focus on command and situational awareness, rather than multitasking in combat. Italian tank design in this era reflected both industrial limitations and doctrinal influences. The Regio Esercito prioritised relatively simple, straightforward solutions, resulting in turrets that forced the commander to balance both leadership and direct engagement responsibilities. The main armament, a 47mm gun, was competitive for its time, but the simultaneous roles of aiming, firing and issuing orders placed immense pressure on the commander gunner. This video will take you inside the turret of the M13, focusing on the commander's dual role and how Italian design philosophy shaped both the layout and the crew's experience. You'll see how the commander's vision, the sighting systems and the practices of operating and firing the main gun influenced the realities of combat for Italian tankers in World War II. In this video, you'll see how M13 commanders coordinated with the driver and fired its weapons from within the turret, revealing how these demands shaped the gritty combat realities of Italian tankers during World War II. The M13 was designed and developed to correct the flaws of Italy's previous medium tank, the M1139. It had many of the features of the M1139, but the important change was the main armament, a 47mm cannon in the turret, rather than just dual machine guns like its predecessor. The M13 was a relatively balanced tank when it first entered service, with a 47mm giving it reasonable anti-tank capability during the early years of World War II, and three machine guns for anti-infantry, two dual 8mm Breda Modello 38 machine guns in a ball mounting in the front hull, and a Breda 38 as a coaxial machine gun alongside the main 47mm in the turret. A fourth could be mounted on the turret top for anti-aircraft use. The M13 was light for a medium, which reflected Italy's unusual weight classification, and by the standards of other nations would be classed as a light tank. Its armour suffered from poor quality steel. It was of mostly bolted construction, with some parts riveted. This was typical of many early war tanks, not just Italy's. The tank featured a crew of 4, driver, loader, machine gunner and commander, who was also the gunner. The tank saw a lot of its service in North Africa. The M13 was a serviceable infantry support tank when it was first deployed in the desert, but its legacy has been affected from its mixed performance. The main factors being that the Italian army commanders often used the tank aggressively as a breakthrough, and secondly that it was deployed in an environment where the tank suffered with reliability performance, and thirdly that the tank remained in service for too long, facing Allied tanks that were much more advanced later in the campaign. The Regio Esercito never got a heavy tank in time for North Africa that could fulfill aggressive frontline roles. Italy's struggles with tank design and construction are often documented, but its enemy, the British, also had problems developing tanks during the early years of the war. Italy had a simple but balanced tank, whereas the British designed tanks for different tactical roles, heavily armoured infantry tanks and faster cruiser tanks. While this seemed a good idea, it also meant that tanks were inflexible in changing tactical situations. The British had limited firepower at first with the 2-pounder and struggled with balance, with early cruiser tank designs lacking enough armour protection. The 2-pounder gun also lacked HE rounds. British tanks also suffered with reliability problems like the Italian tanks in the early war years. There were other constraints for the British that affected design. Designs featured smaller turret rings that limited the size of the turret and therefore the armament. Italy's allies, the Germans, were a step ahead on the outbreak of the war. Although they had light tanks with limited firepower such as the Panzer I and II, they also had the services of Panzer III and IV tanks for fast manoeuvre combat, with tanks designated for anti-armour or infantry support. German tanks had effective crew layouts and ergonomics. They had upgrade potential for the weaponry. For example, the Panzer IV was used early for infantry support with a short barrel howitzer, but upgraded to a long barrel 75mm for anti-tank use later in the war. The same for the Panzer III with its early 37mm cannon upgraded to a 50mm. The tanks tended to be well balanced and integrated well with Germany's blitzkrieg doctrine of rapid and decisive combat. This is a photo of the interior of the hull, where the position of the driver and machine gunner are in the tank, either side of the transmission shaft through the centre. As you can see, pretty cramped. You can see the seat for the commander. Here is a photo for the commander's position. To the left of him would have been the loader. You can see the San Giorgio periscope used for gun optics. Below the optics is a crank. This is used to elevate or depress the gun into position. It was positioned to be operated with his left hand. The elevating gear worked via a worm and worm wheel. The worm, which looked like a screw, is powered by the rotation of the crank, the wheel moving across its pinion that would elevate or depress the gun. The commander would be viewing through the periscope whilst turning the crank to get the gun into position ready to fire. He had a rudimentary range setting on the scope, although it was as much the skill and judgment of the commander. This would be operated with his right hand. The range setting had two settings for armour piercing and HE rounds, and the commander would be instructing the loader which type of ammunition to load into the breech. To fire the cannon, the commander had foot pedals. You can see in this close-up picture of the gun and mantlet. There are two pedals, one to fire the main 47mm gun and the other to fire the Breda 38 machine gun. No need to press the trigger with a finger. You can see the pedals here in this photo of the interior. Here is the coaxial machine gun positioned to the left of the main gun to fire through the front mantlet. Of course, at times the turret will need to rotate to follow a target or aim at another position on the battlefield. The traverse of the turret could be done by hand or through power. The hand traverse included a housing to the right of the gunner, which contained worm reduction gear. The housing is secured to the lower rim of the turret. The pinion is keyed to the shaft of the worm wheel. Positioned in the turret ring of the superstructure is a rack, like a row of teeth that the pinion will cross. The pinion itself, driven by a hand crank and controlled by the commander, engages directly with the internal teeth of this turret ring, allowing manual rotation of the turret when needed. For the power traverse, the manual traverse had to be disengaged, which could be done so through pulling down a lever. The power traverse was a hydraulic system, the calzone oleodynamic, and was placed on the left of the traverse hand wheel. It was a vane type power traverse oil motor that was placed centrally under the lower rim with a conveniently placed control valve. The power traverse motor was connected via hydraulic pipes to a pump positioned on the right rear of the gearbox. For situational awareness, the loader and commander could use hyperscopes to view outside within the safe confines of the tank. There were also vision ports in the hull sides and rear that could be opened and closed. This would be very useful sighting for situations where enemy infantry are incoming. There were also pistol ports, one on either side of the turret, designed to allow the commander and loader inside the tank to safely fire personal small arms out of the vehicle. These ports provide a way to engage enemy infantry threatening the tank at close range, especially in blind spots not covered by the tank's main armament or machine guns. In the M1340 tank, coordination between the commander and the driver was crucial for effective firing and combat performance. While the commander operated the main gun, at the same time the driver needed to position the tank optimally to align the hull and maintain manoeuvrability. Effective coordination was necessary because the turret could turn independently of the hull, so the driver had to position the tank so that the turret's traverse and gun elevation had a tactical advantage for engaging targets quickly. The commander controlled turret movement and firing, requiring clear communication with the driver to avoid getting stuck, caught in unfavourable terrain, or exposing the tank's weaker armour. This is going to require internal communication systems between the commander and the driver. What was used in the M1340 was similar to a ship's telegraph system. You may have seen in a ship where the captain on the bridge pulls or pushes the lever for an engine order, such as full ahead, half ahead, or stop. and this communicates to the engine officers controlling the ship's propulsion in the hull. It is similar in the M1340 tank, and the dial is positioned just under the turret ring, again convenient for the commander. He has a choice of 4 order slots. They are marked Alt, RAL, DT front and ACC. Italian viewers will put me right in the comments, but I think the Alt stands for Alt, meaning stop. RAL is for rallentare, meaning to reduce speed. DT front probably means advance, to go straight ahead. And ACC is for accelerare, meaning to speed up or accelerate. There was an identical dial slot system positioned around the driver. The 2 dial systems were connected through an electric circuit. The commander used a switch, and the dial at the driver's position would illuminate, indicating the order from the commander. The circuit also featured push switches that allowed the lamps to flicker to get the driver's attention. It is not like that any kind of built-in intercom system was used in this tank. The driver at times would be ordered to traverse the tank to turn in another direction. I can only think that verbal commands were shouted over engine noise or some other visual signal was used, hand signals or taps by the commander to get the driver's attention, especially when verbal communication was impossible due to noise. The M1340's main armament reflected both the ingenuity and the challenges of Italy's wartime industry. Its 47mm gun offered respectable firepower early in the conflict, but as armour and tactics evolved, it quickly fell behind more advanced Allied designs. Italy's limited industrial capacity, resource shortages, and slower technological development constrained major improvements to the tank's firepower and overall effectiveness. Yet, despite these shortcomings, the M1340 carried several clever design features, including its internal telegraph communication system between the commander and driver, a simple but effective solution that allowed the crew to coordinate actions without the need for expensive or complex intercom systems. It stands as a reminder of how necessity drove creative engineering, even under the pressures of limited resources and wartime conditions. In the M1340, the commander, also serving as gunner, had to be one of the most skilled men in the crew, because the tank's performance depended heavily on his abilities and experience. He was responsible not only for finding and engaging targets, but also for coordinating the entire crew under combat pressure. As commander gunner, he had to keep his eyes on the sights and periscopes, maintain broad situational awareness, and use the internal telegraph system to give clear, timely instructions to the driver for steering, speed changes, and hull positioning. This demanded excellent hand, eye and foot coordination as he controlled the gun's elevation and traverse, kept his gaze locked through the periscope, and often operated foot controls to fire the weapons while still tracking moving targets. At the same time, he had to direct the loader to select and load the correct ammunition type, switching between armour-piercing and high-explosive rounds, depending on whether the target was enemy armour, infantry or fortifications. Any hesitation or confusion in his orders could slow the rate of fire or result in the wrong round being in the breech at a critical moment. Because the driver's view was limited and the loader focused entirely inside the turret, the commander-gunner effectively served as the tank's eyes and brain, making rapid decisions about where to move, what to shoot, and in what order. His combat experience, judgment, and ability to stay calm under fire were therefore critical, often making the difference between an M1340 fighting effectively or being quickly outmanoeuvred and knocked out.